Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Ivy Digital event. My name is Beri Meric. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Ivy, and we're here with Darrell West, VP of Governance at the Brookings Institute. Darrell, thank you for being here. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Barry. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to our conversation.
It's really, really great to have you here. This is our second digital event of the year, and we're going to be talking about the future of work. And specifically, what we're going to do is to think about the future of work in terms of how it will impact our lives as individuals, our lives as leaders, leaders of teams, our roles as leaders of organizations that are also helping shape this future, and also our roles as global citizens that want to create a better world for the future. So we're incredibly lucky to have Darrell here, who's written a book on the subject. And to kick us off, Darrell, I want to ask you, what got you to focus in on this particular topic of future of work? Why is it so critical, and why now versus any other time in the last few years where there's been constant amounts of change?
So I direct the Brookings Center for Technology Innovation. So we're interested in all things digital, and there are amazing innovations that are taking place right now. But I also am an educator. So I spent 26 years teaching at Brown University, and then moved to Brookings about a decade ago. And both at Brown and at Brookings, I deal a lot with young people. And in my conversations with them, I hear their anxiety. They're worried about the future. Are robots going to take all their jobs? How are they going to cope with all of the new technology innovations that are taking place? So I wanted to write the book just to address what innovations are taking place, what the possible impact will be on the workforce, and then what we can do about it. And my basic point is people are still in control despite the wave of automation and technology that's going to unfold in the coming years. There are lots of things people can do to protect themselves and protect their organizations.
Excellent. I love that approach of people are in control. But of course, the more we know and the better we understand the different nuances at play here, the better we'll be able to exercise that control to shape the future that we want for ourselves and for our communities at large. I was also at Brown University when I was a younger person as an undergrad. And I remember back then, it felt like there's a big world out there, anything is possible, but there were still many set pathways that people would follow. But now as I'm also working with people who are more freshly graduated and so forth, there seems to be a much greater sense of uncertainty than when I graduated back in 2006. And it hasn't been, that long. So certainly I think this is a critical time, and I'm really excited to dive in. So first of all, there is a lot going on, right? It's not just whether machines will replace humans more than they've done in the past, but there's all kinds of other innovations and changes going on. So could you provide us with a framework of, at a 50,000 foot level, what are the key areas of change that are taking place that are influencing what the future of work will look like?
I might say the key changes that people should keep their eye on are robots, AI, and automation. There are amazing developments taking place in each of those areas. With robots, for example, there are factories now in the United States as well as elsewhere around the world that are fully automated. That basically it's robots that are doing the assembly. There are warehouses where robots are playing a major role. Artificial intelligence is really taking off. This summer, I have a new book coming out on AI, calling it kind of AI for Dummies, to try and explain what it is and how it's likely to affect things. And then, of course, we're seeing automation starting to unfold in a lot of areas. The retail sector, the Amazon Go stores are fully automated. So you basically walk in, you go shopping, and then you walk out through turnstiles, and it automatically charges your credit card or your mobile payment system. There are restaurants where I've gone in, and instead of ordering from a waiter or a waitress, they hand you a tablet and you order directly from that menu. So I think it's an exciting time at a lot of levels, in the sense that there are amazing innovations that are taking place. But of course, everybody's worried about what it's going to mean for them.
Absolutely. So these three changes, robots, AI, automation, clearly they're going to be transformative. And these are all, in a way, like technological changes. In our conversation earlier, you'd also mentioned like tech changes are like kind of like one column. The other column is business model changes. There's also fundamental changes to how we're doing business. So could you share a little bit about that angle? Like what are the key components of the business model changes that may also most significantly impact the future of work?
I think that is a very important point because people often focus just on the technology, but people should understand there are two revolutions that are taking place simultaneously, the tech revolution, but these changes in business models. When you look at what companies are doing and how they're dealing with their workers, a lot of companies have downsized, they're outsourcing, they're relying on temporary workers, independent contractors, short-term people. Oftentimes, people have jobs that don't have health or retirement benefits attached to them. And so when you think about people's anxiety, when you think about the rise of economic insecurity, it's not just the technology that is driving those fears, it's these changes in business models. And I know a number of young people who, after they graduate, it's hard for them to find that first job with benefits, that sometimes they have to string together 2 or 3 part-time jobs. Or sometimes they have jobs where they're simply not getting health care as a part of that. And so when we think about what are the consequences of all the things going on for the workforce, we need to focus both on the technology side as well as how businesses are running their operations.
Absolutely. So what I want to do is, so we're going to take, the tech changes, the business model changes. Of course, we're here to talk about how to best navigate these trends. Before we dive into that though, just so everybody gets like the most colorful, visceral vision of like the logical conclusion to these changes, right? Like when you mention about, oh, you can go into a store and like just walk in, walk out, you don't really need humans necessarily there for that. Those are things that we're all experiencing more and more now. But I want to, fast forward the clock. We don't know if this will be in 5, 10, 20 years, regardless. What's like the logical conclusion? And I'd like you to share like in a spectrum. So if we navigate all of these changes in a great way, how could the world look like? But also if we don't manage it in a good way, how could the world look like? I think what this will do is to give our members an understanding of like the spectrum of possibilities, right? And then the rest of our conversation can really focus on, okay, how do we kind of drive towards the positive outcomes and make sure to mitigate the risks of the negative outcomes?
I mean, in general, the tech revolution is going to unfold faster than a lot of people think. Like, we're already deep into pilot testing with autonomous vehicles. I think in a lot of major cities, certainly in the next couple of years, we're going to see autonomous vehicles on the road for real, and then that will accelerate certainly in the coming decade. The retail sector, we talked a little bit. The restaurant sector is going through a lot of changes. The world of finance is seeing a lot of automation that is coming in there. Wealth managers are developing AI systems so that people can directly get financial advice based on detailed empirical analysis of what is going on. But the changes that are going to unfold are not just going to affect the entry-level jobs, which is what a lot of people fear. There are mid and higher level jobs that also are going to get affected. So for example, in the healthcare area, we already are seeing AI systems that can look at x-rays and CAT scans and with a very high degree of accuracy diagnose particular problems, things that weren't biopsies, additional tests, or whatever. So we're going to see a range of consequences, but there's kind of the optimistic scenario and a pessimistic scenario. And the optimistic scenario is 10 and 20 years from now, if we as a country and we as a world make the right decisions, we could end up in a situation where technology is doing the routine, menial, and dangerous tasks thereby freeing the rest of us for higher level jobs, more interesting jobs, jobs where there's more creativity involved. People may not have to work as many hours as they do right now. You know, we may have a 30-hour work week as opposed to 40, 50, or 60 hours a week. And so there are certainly ways in which this revolution could unfold in a very positive way. But then, of course, the fear on the opposite side is it's not going to unfold in a positive way, that there's going to be a significant number of people who are left behind, that people who don't have technical skills, how are they going to fare in the digital economy? We know there are major geographic disparities in the tech sector. Like a lot of the tech companies now are centered either on the East Coast, the West Coast, or a few metropolitan areas in between. There are large parts of the United States that very well could be left behind. So there could be increases in income inequality. There could be the polarization between areas that are doing well versus areas that are falling behind. And so there's the risk of a dystopian future that could be quite problematic. And so that's the reason why we really need to focus on what we can do ourselves, what we can do in our organizations, and what we need to do as a country so that we end up at the more positive end of that spectrum as opposed to the more challenging end.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for sharing the both optimistic and pessimistic view. Essentially, the spectrum, based on how you see it, is all around like on the positive side, while it may free us up and actually maybe give us even better resources than we currently have on average to pursue what we want to pursue while working less hours. On the potentially negative side or the pessimistic side, these changes could leave a lot of people behind and potentially in a really uncertain and negative, like a worse off state. So we obviously want to navigate this in the best way. And as you just said, we got to think about it as individuals, organizations, and as a country. So let's actually go maybe in that order. Let's start from an individual's perspective. What's the best way for an individual? And for the sake of this conversation, let's both talk about, individuals like, let's say, IVY members who are like rising leaders, established leaders in different industries, with a good track record, but still many years to go in their career, as well as, let's say, the average American, however you want to define that. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on how can individuals best navigate the future of work, looking at both like the general population as well as like people who are maybe even better positioned to lead change in a positive way to have a better impact on everybody else.
I mean, I think the key idea here is lifelong learning. The old model where people basically invest in education up through about age 25, and then after that, you kind of just pick up things here or there, I think is going to have to give way to a model where people upgrade their job skills regularly throughout their lifetime. Because one of the things that we already know is there certainly is a risk that some jobs are going to be lost through automation, but we also know there are going to be new types of jobs created, including new jobs that we might not even envision. But in order to qualify for those kind of jobs, people are going to need new skills at age 30, 40, 50, and 60. And so online courses, certificate programs, a lot of businesses are now doing workforce development for their own employees. Like these are things people need to emphasize, and that will then help them navigate the technology disruptions that are coming. It'll kind of put them in a position that as new types of jobs get created, they will qualify for those jobs. So, I think if people really take their education seriously and basically emphasize adult education throughout their lifetime, those individuals could end up doing really well.
Okay, fascinating. And it's a great unsolicited plug for IVY and what we do here. So thank you for that, Darrell. And just curious, other than obviously an organization like IVY that's constantly engaging with leading minds on different topics to help, stay abreast of such important topics as today's one, what other kind of forms of lifelong learning do you suggest that for people? Is it just more like the attitude, like whatever resource you can find? That's great. Or do you have also other like specific things that you think could be helpful for everybody?
I mean, I think people need to focus on concrete job skills. So, some of it could be technical skills of learning how to code or kind of thinking about some of the emerging technologies and what are the skills that would be required to take advantage of those things. But then there also are more general skills, kind of the so-called soft skills that people need to really work on and try and upgrade throughout their lives. So these are jobs or tasks of communication, writing, independent thinking, problem-solving skills, teamwork. And I think the people who are going to end up doing the best are those who have this combination of some of the hard skills that are obvious in a technical world, but then the soft skills that would put them in a position to really take advantage of that. I think we're going to need help on both of those fronts. And so, either online courses, adult education platforms, certificate programs. Some universities are offering adult education courses. I think there's going to be a wide range of avenues for people to acquire new kinds of skills.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Darrell. I think that's a powerful point. I think a lot of people maybe sometimes over-focus on vocational, deeply technical things that needs to constantly be upgraded. But as more and more machines take on some of those more technical tasks, then our ability to relate to other human beings. And in most of the talks I've hosted with leading CEOs, they've all mentioned that EQ, like you just need to be smart enough, but beyond that, EQ and your ability to deal with other people is going to play the most important role for future success in your career, especially as we rise through the ranks. And then here at Ivy, we have also, in 2020, we have this Global Leadership Accelerator program that we've launched that will every single month help people upgrade different leadership key areas to give those like soft skills to supplement the hard skills that they often already have. So thank you for that. Let's move now from the individual level to the organizational level, right? So if it's critical for individuals to have lifelong learning, to be more agile and more adaptable to this changing environment, what about at an organizational level? What can companies do to better adapt to the future of work?
I mean, I think people need to understand that organizations are going to go through pretty substantial changes in the next 10 and certainly the next 20 years. And what I see happening is in the digital world, organizations are going to flatten. We're not going to need 5, 10, or 15 levels within the organization. They are going to be flatter. Because when you think about the people in the middle management part of organizations, a lot of what those people do is supervising other people to make sure they're doing their jobs. In a digital world, we're not going to need supervisors because there's going to be automated online assessment of people. And let me just give you a couple of quick examples of this. If you fly into the Beijing airport, the very first government official you deal with is the passport officer. I was recently there, and so I hand the person my passport. He was processing it. And then at the end of that transaction, I looked down, there was an electronic device that allowed me to rate that passport officer on a 1 to 4 scale. And so they're obviously thinking about automated assessment as a tool. A few weeks ago, I was at my local Bank of America branch for a transaction, dealt with a customer service representative. Had a half-hour conversation, and he provided the service that I was requesting. And then by the time I come back to my office, I'd gotten an email from Bank of America with an online survey asking me to rate the performance of that individual, as well as my satisfaction with the overall interaction. So, between the China example and the US example, this tells you how organizations are going to change. They're going to flatten. We're not going to need those mid-level supervisors. There's going to be automated assessment that can evaluate you on each and every aspect of what you're doing. We're not talking about an annual evaluation. We're talking about a day-by-day, hour-by-hour, and almost minute-by-minute assessment. So that's obviously going to be a big change. Not everybody's going to be happy with that type of system, but that's the way in which the organizations of the future are going to be operating.
And so let's talk about the consequences of that and how we can best navigate that. So this the ability for organizations to automate as much as possible and build in like direct customer response to their processes so that there's transparency and data. A lot of this, we're experiencing it. Everybody on this conversation will receive an email that also asks them to rate from 0 to 10 within 24 hours of this conversation. So, but what does this actually mean, for somebody who is leading an organization? So to ensure they navigate these tech and business model changes, what should they be doing to prepare for this, to navigate it in the best way?
Well, people are going to have to adapt to the way organizations are going to assess them. And so, like an old model where you may sit at your desk and you're working on various computer activities, and then it's the NFL playoffs, and so you spend a little bit of time going to the ESPN website, checking out your favorite teams, seeing how things are going. It's like, companies now have software that monitors how people are spending their time, what they're doing on their computer and things like that. So people are just going to have to understand organizations are going to act differently. They're going to assess employees differently. And so therefore, the employee is going to have to adapt to that new reality and kind of be more serious, more task-oriented, kind of do the things that are going to comprise the nature of these types of assessments. Like, those are the people who can navigate that, who will end up doing well.
Thank you, Darrell. And what about, organizations themselves? Like, which organizations are most likely to survive all these changes that are happening, and which are less likely to survive? And I ask that so that we can kind of figure out what factors we should be looking to implement in our organizations to help us better navigate the future.
I mean, the ones that are going to succeed are those that are agile and nimble. We live in a world of mega change. We see it all the time. They're just large-scale transformations taking place in business, in economics, in politics, in geopolitics, in global relations. Every day, every week, there are new things happening. And so the environment in which organizations operate is going to be wild, chaotic, and somewhat unpredictable. And so organizations need to prepare for that. And you can't have big bureaucracies that are slow to react, because if you're slow to react, you're not going to make it. Like, you will not react in time to really deal with these mega changes. And so Charles Darwin had this line when he was thinking about evolution. He was saying that it's not the strongest or the most intelligent that are going to survive. It's the most agile and the most nimble. And I think that logic applies to people. It also applies to organizations.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Darrell. Let's now move to the third tier. So from a national policy perspective, for us to create the best environment for both individuals and organizations to survive and thrive in the future of work, what are the key policies that you found are most likely to be beneficial, and which ones are perhaps getting some press, but in your view, may not be as effective as helping us navigate through the changes that are to come?
We're going to have to renegotiate our social contract with one another, which is just a very fundamental rethinking of public policy, of worker benefits, how we define work and how we think about it. Because as we're moving from an industrial to a digital economy, it's going to reshape everything. And we need policies that basically help people kind of adapt to the new realities. The good news is, this is not the first time we've dealt with this type of change. Like 100 years ago, we were moving from an agrarian to an industrial world, and it was a long process. It took a number of decades to work through that. But if you think about how we navigated that, we developed new public policies. Like Social Security was developed, unemployment compensation. That was a time period when we kind of moved towards mass education, encouraged people to get a high school diploma and then eventually to go on to college. There was a wholesale rethinking of the social contract and changing policies in a way that helped workers cope with industrialization. And so today, as we are in the early stages of moving towards a digital economy, we're going to have to rethink our public policies. So one of the things that is likely to happen is there's going to be an increase in what we call job churn, meaning people moving from job to job, position to position, company to company, and sector to sector. In this type of situation, one very needed policy change is going to be an emphasis on portable benefits, because more people are just going to be moving around. And it'll be very important that as they're moving around from position to position and company to company, that they're able to maintain their health benefits, their retirement benefits, and disability insurance, as well as a range of other things. So that's just an example of kind of one policy change that we need to make. But there are dozens of other changes. We're just going to have to renegotiate our social contract in a very fundamental way.
All right, so let's dive into that a bit deeper. So I love what the analogy is clear. Moving from farming to industry led to a huge change in so much, including also even voting and things like that. But there's a tremendous change in the welfare state type methods and so forth. You mentioned portable benefits as one of the key policy changes that can help because people are moving around faster. What else? I'll just throw one out there, but like, what's your views on universal basic income, for example, and other kind of more like sweeping potential changes or proposals to fundamentally change how we view social security?
I mean, there are lots of policy proposals that are floating around. So as you point out, basic income is one way to navigate a period of economic insecurity, where basically you give people $2,000 a month, and that allows them to at least cover their basic expenses. There are others that are suggesting a kind of trade assistance programs where, if you lose a job through trade, that you qualify for worker retraining, various types of benefits and so on. Some people have suggested we need to generalize that more broadly beyond trade to technology and automation. Like if you lose your job because a robot is now doing what you used to do, that should qualify you for additional worker retraining and job benefits of various sorts. So I think we're in a period where what we need is experimentation at the local level, pilot projects with rigorous evaluation built in, because even if there are government programs and corporate programs that might have been successful 10 and 20 years ago, it doesn't mean those same programs are going to be successful in the future, just because the world is going to be different, the business models are different, and the whole political context is going to be different. So what we're encouraging local communities to do, and there are a number of places, both in the United States as well as in Europe, that are doing this, is to start to experiment with new types of social programs, build in an evaluation component, so we can see, do these programs really work in the way that we want them to work? And out of that, then develop broader, bigger, and national policies.
Got it. Thank you so much. So just like agile, nimble, startup approach to things, experiment to figure out what can work best, and then roll it out more nationally and potentially globally, as other countries will start emulating what's working best in other places. And there's, I guess, a lot of experimentations already happening since, there's so many different states around the world that are trying different things. Do you have, so in addition to the portable benefits, just curious, like, do you have other policy changes, like tangible policy changes that you think are potentially no-brainers? Like it's just a matter of time. We absolutely need to do X, Y, Z. Any ones like that? And is basic income one of those? Or what are the ones that you think are like totally feasible and should just be done to put us in the best footing for the future of work?
I mean, one of the most successful government programs right now is the Earned Income Tax Credit. It's a program to basically help people who are experiencing economic insecurity to basically, if you've not done very well financially in a particular year, you can file that as part of your tax return and then get a tax refund that essentially is the government helping you navigate that period of insecurity. But we need to tweak that program for the digital era in the sense of right now, since that program operates through tax returns, the benefit that you get out of it comes once a year in the form of a tax refund. That doesn't really help people with their week-to-week expenses or their monthly expenses. And so one easy way to tweak a program that has been enormously successful is to basically start to distribute that money either on a quarterly basis, or even better would be on a monthly basis. So it starts to approximate real income, and that people can then use that to deal with periods of unemployment that they may be experiencing, or periods of low employment, when they have a low-wage job. So there are some policies that we have right now that are actually working well, but need to be tweaked for the digital era.
Got it. Thank you so much, Darrell. That's great. So what I'm going to do, I've got a number of audience questions coming in already. So I'm going to start baking them in here. Excuse me. Excuse me, it's the cold season, so I had to sneeze there. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna take audience questions. If anybody who's listening into this conversation live, if you have any questions, please type it into the Q&A box that's at the middle bottom of your screen. And if you want to ask a question directly, just say so, and then I will tune you in so you can ask a question. Otherwise, I'm going to just read the questions on behalf of the members who submitted them. So in no particular order, one question that we just received is as follows, very tangible, very practical. The question goes as follows. Other than the obvious manufacturing jobs, any concrete advice you can give us on industries or roles it would definitely not be smart to build your career around given the coming changes? So what are certain jobs that are not so obvious that they may be going away that you would, based on your research, suggest people to kind of like start moving away from or not go into?
I mean, the types of jobs that are going to be pretty directly affected in a very short period of time are, as the questioner noted, jobs in factories, because there's a lot of automation taking place there. Taxi drivers and ride-sharing service drivers are going to be affected when autonomous vehicles start to come in. And so when you start seeing those rolling out in major cities, it's like the people who are going to be affected by that are going to be those people who are providing driving services. In the retail sector, sales clerks, those positions are at a high risk of automation. Waiters and waitresses in terms of the restaurant world. There are going to be a lot of pretty immediate consequences in the finance sector. There's probably going to be quite a bit of downsizing there. So, for example, in wealth management, what we're already finding is human wealth advisors actually are not so good because humans are emotional. And, we often buy high and sell low, which is the opposite of what you actually need to do. And AI-based systems are actually showing good results because they take the emotion out of investing and managing your money. So I think in all those types of positions, there's a high risk of either job loss or some fundamental change of what those people are doing. So, kind of staying away from those types of positions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So just a quick follow-up question that we just got, which is what jobs do you believe can never be substituted by AI? And that's from Tatiana Haid.
Well, the best job of the future, if I can guarantee a prosperous future for anybody who has skills in this area, is data analytics, because what the digital economy is generating more than anything else is data. And so people who understand how to analyze data, how to interpret data, how to use the information, that is going to be a huge growth area. And in companies and organizations, as they're moving to online assessment, like people who can make sense of that information are going to be very well served. But it's not just people with technical skills who I think can do well. Again, going back to the soft skills, like people who have strong emotional intelligence, can relate to others, can work as part of teams, can demonstrate good problem-solving skills. Like, we're always going to need people like that, because there's certainly going to be new types of situations, new problems. Organizations are going to have to figure out how to kind of restructure and reorient themselves. So those who have the skills to basically undertake those types of tasks are going to be in very hot demand as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Darrell. So essentially data analytics on the one hand, and then the people skills based jobs on the other hand. Thank you very much. All right, next question. This is coming from Jeff Hittner, who is actually another Ivy thought leader. He asks the following: do you think that a four-year university and multi-year grad school will have the same importance, particularly with new jobs and industries appearing and disappearing so quickly? Why or why not?
I think that type of career pattern is certainly still going to be very beneficial for people. I mean, when you look at the current situation and just the impact of a four-year education on your lifetime earnings, I mean, there's very strong evidence that people make hundreds of thousands of dollars of more based on getting a college education versus not having it. So that is certainly going to be valuable. The value of advanced graduate degrees depends a lot field to field and kind of what one's particular situation is. But in general, I think most investments in human capital are still going to pay off very well for people. It's just, the more skills you have, the more options you're going to have, the more flexibility you're going to have, and upgrading those skills over the course of your life will kind of help to ensure that you will maintain relevance as the nature of jobs start to change.
Excellent. Thank you, Darrell. And just to add from my side on that one, I mean, the hard skills, it sounds like, if you're changing jobs and so forth, you're going to need to keep learning those as you go. But some of those soft skills, especially for me and for many others, like school has played such an important role in shaping those softer skills, or like the broader global knowledge of things that aren't necessarily technically important to your job, but very important to you being an interesting, valuable person to do business with or interact with. So thank you for that. Alrighty, so we've got a bunch of questions coming in, so I'm going to just keep going at full speed. Thank you, Darrell, for all the great answers so far. We've got a question again from Tatiana Haid. She asks, what effect, if any, do you foresee the AI and automation may have on the future of politics in the world? And that was her question. And then for me, just like building on that a little bit before you answer, is a lot of what you mentioned about like quick feedback, customer-centered, like, business decision-making, less need for supervisors, like in a business sense, the flatter organizations, all the things you mentioned. And then you compare this to still how we vote and, how policies get made, or, even between the elected officials, like, how do you think? So obviously we are seeing how media and news and manipulation of news is impacting politics. But when we fast forward, let's say those are maybe some like initial pains we're feeling, trying to figure out how to deal with the freely available media generated by anyone. But how will these changes actually impact how our policymakers are selected, and also how they're able to push policies through?
I mean, right now we live in a high-risk era in terms of politics and governance, because we're already seeing the negative ramifications of technology in terms of disinformation campaigns, intervention by foreign government, manipulating social media platforms, spreading false information, the emergence of deep fake videos where, images and videos are being altered to make it look like you either did or said things that you didn't do, but it comes across as very authentic, and it's hard for people to know what's true versus what's false. Like, just all those things are really disrupting our politics. Certainly, it's going to be a factor in the 2020 election, as it was in our past presidential campaign. But at a deeper level, what people also need to be recognizing is one of the most dangerous risks for our political system right now, out of technology innovation, is technology is increasing income inequality. It's creating haves and have-nots. Like, the people who have those technical skills are going to do great, but then there are a bunch of people who are being left behind. We talked about the geographic disparities. People on the East Coast and the West Coast in general are going to do very well because lots of economic activity taking place there, lots of new jobs being created. In the heartland, that's really not the case. And so the political risk that we face right now is that populist style Trumpism may outlast Trump himself, just because the impact of technology on furthering income inequality and furthering geographic disparities means that kind of the populist backlash that we saw in 2016 that elected Donald Trump may not be idiosyncratic to 2016, may not be idiosyncratic to Donald Trump. That we may, for the next 10 to 20 years, as we're working through the changes in business models as well as the changes in technology, it may just create chaos, a backlash, unhappiness of varying sorts from people who are being left behind. So the greatest fear I have is that our politics, which have been quite turbulent in recent years, are going to continue to be that way. And even if Trump loses in 2020, it doesn't mean that that kind of chaos and turbulence is going to end, because Trump is actually not causing the turbulence. He may be accentuating it, but the real turbulence is being caused by these underlying trends in the economy, the business models, and the technology innovation. All those things are going to be there long after Donald Trump leaves the scene. And so our politics, our governance, our ability to take the policy actions that are going to be necessary to improve economic security and help people deal with these technology disruptions. Like, if I were confident that we had good governance now, I would actually be completely optimistic about the future. The problem is we have really poor governance right now. Polarization, hyperpartisanship, and a government that has difficulty addressing the clear problems that we see right now. As long as that continues, it means it's going to be hard for governance to really undertake the policy reforms that I believe are going to be necessary over the next decade.
Thank you so much. That's a powerful message, right? So it's almost, it's a great reminder that it doesn't overcome, is that, like, just specific individuals don't cause the systemic turbulence. The systemic turbulence is there, and it's caused by a lot of the factors that we've been talking about today, like it's the technological changes, business model changes, and then, we're trying to catch up to make sure that, people aren't left behind, but many aren't. So thank you for that, Darrell. Really appreciate it. We've got a related question from Ryan Carrison, a member here in New York. And I think it's very related, and also a lot of us can relate to the question. So he asks the following: who do you feel will be responsible for the moderation of near instant feedback to service and product-centric jobs? And can you see this crossing over into personal interactions, such as in the Black Mirror episode Nosedive, where your score is instantly affected by the feedback given from another person, even if just a mere brief encounter in an elevator, for example? Ultimately, do you feel this could culminate in a score which replaces credit scores, replaces how credit scores are used within society? And how will we counter the balance of bias and discrimination? So that's the end of Ryan's question. And just adding, in China, obviously, there's a system similar to this in place, and it's not just run by a social media company, but actually by the government. So could you tell us a little bit about how you view the social scoring type approaches, both in companies, as Ryan asked, but also from a policy perspective, and then how that impacts our basic rights and freedoms that we cherish deeply here in the U.S.?
I mean, that's a great question, and it certainly raises a lot of interesting issues there. But we actually already are starting to see those types of social credit systems emerge. Obviously, in China, there's a big push in that direction, but even here in the United States, we're seeing it. There are credit companies where, you know, the old model was basically look at a person's income level, look at their debt level, and then decide, you know, can they take on additional debt given their current financial capabilities. That type of approach to providing loans is starting to give way to assessing people's character and their ability to repay loans through their social networks, with the idea being that if you are part of an established social system, you have social support, you're part of social networks, you're probably in a good situation, and therefore the ability to repay loans is going to be pretty high, and so therefore they're going to give you the loan. Conversely, you know, if you're outside established social systems, not part of social networks, you know, haven't demonstrated responsible behavior in your online activities, companies are going to conclude you're not a good bet to repay loans. So we're already in the United States seeing companies basically develop those types of models that essentially are judging your ability to repay based on your online activities, as opposed to, do you have a job, do you have income, and can you repay the loans? So we are certainly already starting to move down that model. The question raises the interesting issue of, are these types of systems that are emerging in e-commerce and finance and elsewhere, is there going to be a greater likelihood of bias, prejudice, and discrimination in that type of world? People talk about digital redlining. You know, we're kind of familiar with traditional redlining where, you know, banks used to not lend as much in minority communities just because they viewed those communities being poorer, more crime, and people not having the same capacity to repay loans. In the digital world, there's the risk that we may replicate redlining, but in a digital sense. And it could be based on the social credit system, how people are acting online. And so we actually are doing a lot of work at Brookings right now, kind of looking at AI, particularly from the bias standpoint, just in terms of how do we make sure that our current anti-discrimination laws get applied in the digital world. You know, there are a lot of prohibitions, you know, against redlining based on race, gender, and marital status. We have to make sure that the new AI systems that are being developed don't create loopholes in those laws, that our AI is fair and inclusive as opposed to unfair and biased.
Thank you so much, Darrell. Really appreciate that thoughtful answer. And thank you again, Ryan, for that great question. Certainly a lot at stake. And hopefully we'll all play our part in, you know, going in the right direction. We've got a new question that came in from Stephanie Baldwin. She asked the following: continuous/lifelong learning sounds great, but many of us already work 50 to 60 hour long weeks, and with downsizing have to do more with less. Are workers prioritizing learning today, or is this an area of concern? What role, if any, should organizations play in helping workers prioritize learning?
Actually, the good news is there are a number of companies that actually are prioritizing professional development for their employees, because they understand that the world of work is changing, that they need a workforce that has new job skills. And the more progressive companies are now starting to provide educational opportunities either in-house, it could be an in-house education program, or they're providing tuition reimbursement, you know, if you need to go to a local college or some online platform in order to get that advanced skills. I think that's the type of thing that's going to accelerate. And in fact, it's going to become a distinguishing factor when people are choosing among different types of companies for employment. Like right now, we kind of look at, you know, the salary level and, you know, who offers a more competitive package, the benefit package. people also need to start looking at the workforce development and the professional development benefits of a particular company. And I think the companies that are offering more generous professional development opportunities are going to be the ones that do well, because they're going to get really good workers, because people are going to see the benefits of that type of program, and they're going to want to work for those types of companies.
Excellent. Thank you, Darrell. Very very thoughtful answer. And I can also share that, like, both as an employer, but also just through Ivy members and other business owners that I come across, this is definitely like there's a huge demand for learning from employees at all levels. And the employers that are at the top of their game, like the big companies and brands we've all heard of, they're investing massive resources in helping their talent grow and be retained. However, smaller and medium-sized organizations obviously have a bit more of a challenge because they don't have spare billions of dollars just lying around there. So it's a bit harder. And based on this, I just want to share with everybody who's listening we've recently launched an Ivy for Business program that enables very innovative employers to essentially pay for the memberships of Ivy members so that they can provide them with all the learning that Ivy provides and all the thought leaders that we introduce everyone to, as a way, like something that as a business they would not go about doing because it's, it takes a lot of dedicated effort. So for anyone who's interested in that, you might already have your business covering this, or you may want to get your business to cover it. I highly encourage you to do so. And you can email us at membership@ivy.com, and we'd love to set you up with that. So that's a little bit of an aside, but we've seen massive demand for this organizational-based learning as well. So I just wanted to add that. We've got one final question from Evan, who wanted to go back to the point about these flat organizations. So he asked for us to walk him through a bit more on how more frequent job performance evaluations make for flatter organizations, and are there other ways you think organizations will flatten? So Darrell, I'll let you go first, and I'll add a little bit on my side, and then I've got one final question for you myself before we wrap this up today.
I mean, I think organizations are going to be using data in all sorts of new and creative ways to evaluate employees, restructure their operations, and basically just get more efficient in the process. So there are going to be a lot of changes in that regard. But I think in general, organizations are going to be evaluating people not once a year, but once a day or once an hour, because digital data basically allow you to evaluate people on an ongoing basis and in real time. And we're going to see that either in the form of surveys, kind of judging interactions you may have with your local bank. I mean, I find that when I fly on an airline, I now get a survey from that airline asking me to rate my experience there. When I stay in a hotel, same thing is happening. It's like, these types of real-time assessment tools are becoming quite prevalent. So we're going to see that spread, I think, in a lot of different ways.
Right, and just thank you, Darrell. And to just quickly add to that, Evan, for what it's worth, this took me many, many, many years to learn. I wish it was taught to me in business school or elementary school, whichever. But one of the things I found, and this probably resonates with a lot of the entrepreneurs on the call, but also anyone who has to manage a P&L. Whenever something goes right in an organization, a lot of times the first reaction is, oh, that's great, that's working, but now we're stretched really thin because that thing is working. We need more people, and we can afford it because it's, it's bringing us revenue. And especially in a fast-growing startup, like our initial reaction was always like that, like, okay, if it's working, then everyone's reaction is let's staff it more. Over time, though, what I've realized is, one, to be more scalable, you need to obviously keep your costs, as low as possible so that they're not scaling as fast as your revenues. But more importantly, like a framework that we're using now is, okay, something is great, working really well, and we need more resources. But before we hire anyone, we answer the following questions, like, can this thing just be automated? Like, can we just build code? Can we build technology or buy technology, like a software as a service, to help just the same one person actually deal with twice as many tasks or 10 times as many tasks by using technology. So that's question number one. Second question we ask is, okay, if we absolutely cannot totally automate this with technology, is there any way we can use, outsourced, dedicated labor, like that could be from anywhere in the world, just to do the like relatively simple human needs and automate the rest of it? And then only if that's also not possible, then would we say, okay, do we hire a full-time person to really focus on this, on what they're going to do? So that kind of a discipline is something that's helpful. How, to Evan's question of like how that leads to flatter organizations, is that you then need a lot less layers of people because you're looking to just automate as much of it as possible, and outsourcing to technology first and foremost, and being more agile. And we didn't talk much about it, but like also the ability to be remote working, like where the teams can be distributed and so forth, leads to kind of an organization where you can't have too many managers because it's not necessary. So that's from personal experience, for what it's worth for anyone who might have been curious about that. Thank you, Evan, for the great question. And thank you for Darrell for your perspective as well. One final question for you, Darrell, and this is really important at the beginning of the year, but also based on other conversations we've been hosting here at Ivy. We recently hosted Derek Thompson from The Atlantic, and he writes a lot of the articles that we, like if anybody reads The Atlantic, probably many of the articles you've read are from him. And he talked about this trend called workism, where we're looking, like, we talked a lot about the future of work now, so we'd be remiss to not mention this. What do we think about the fact that like employees are more and more looking to their employers to provide them with meaning and connection and support and friendship and camaraderie and all these things that in the past was maybe a bit more evenly allocated between maybe your religious faith or religious organization, your friend groups and family that you live with, and so very often, and other like ways of approaching life. Whereas now it's kind of like, a lot of, there's another Atlantic key article that came out, was like the kind of potential demerits of meritocracy. Like how is it, like those at the top of their game are actually working harder than ever, who's reaping the benefits. So just curious about like that aspect of the future of work, since people are now getting detached from all the like original, like the more common kind of, let's say, safety nets of friendship, family, religion, and relying more on their work to provide them not just an income, but sense of belonging. How do you see that evolving? Will that actually become something that employers really actively try to provide? Or rather, do you foresee other kinds of organizational changes, countrywide changes or religious changes, belief-based systems that actually help address this instead of corporations?
I mean, we definitely are seeing a lot more interest in all those kinds of topics and activities within organizations and within companies. When you look at surveys of employees broken down by age, like young people want a different type of job than what people of my generation wanted. Like people in my generation were looking for a good income, a kind of reliability, financial stability, and so on. Young people want all those things, but as your question points out, there's a bunch of other stuff they want as well. Like they want a sense that they're contributing to the community. And so therefore, a lot of organizations are now organizing community service projects for their employees as a way to help satisfy that need. Companies are developing affinity groups so that like-minded people can come together within the organization, share their experiences, learn from each other, and so on. So I think in all these ways, we're seeing especially the younger generation wants more of a connection to the community. They want to make sure not just that they're earning an income, but they're contributing some public good, that they're doing something good for the overall community so that they feel good about what they're doing. And so I think organizations are going to have to respond to that because that's what a lot of young people want these days.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So essentially being mission-oriented or positive impact-oriented, focusing on that is one of the best things that organizations can do to also provide their employees who help do everything in the business to feel a sense of connection to like a greater cause that they're a part of. So thank you for that. We're right at 1 p.m. Eastern. Darrell, you were absolutely fantastic today. Thank you so much for, first of all, focusing your attention and energies on researching this area and publishing this great book on the future of work. And thank you especially for joining us live here today to share the message and engaging with all of us here at Ivy. We'll be taking everything you shared with us and sharing it with our loved ones, our colleagues, and everybody we know. So the impact you made here today is something we deeply appreciate.
And thank you very much. Great questions, and I appreciate the questions from your audience as well.
Thank you, Darrell, and thank you to everybody for joining. Hope you take 2020 as an opportunity to shape the future of work, not just for yourself, but for your organization and community world at large. And I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Take care, everybody.